All right, members, supporters of the American Battlefield Trust, I really wish we were together out on battlefields doing what we would be doing during Trust conferences, but we can't, so I hope this can serve as some sort of a substitute. We are at Yorktown, and just by way of reminder or as way as orientation, Yorktown proper is about 3 or 4 miles off in that direction, so is the Colonial National Historic Park. In other words, you would have the James River about, about 9-10 miles off in that direction, and you'd have the York River a mile or two off in that direction. In between those two things is Wormley Creek. And of course, I think we're going to be talking here a little bit about the Peninsula Campaign before we get down to what I really want to talk about, and that is some of the photographic coverage around here. So it is 1862, and by April of 1862, George McClellan had incredibly moved, I believe, the largest army in the world via a whole bunch of boats on a whole bunch of trips down to Fortress or Fort Monroe at the end of the Virginia Peninsula, and then the Union started moving westward toward Richmond. It's going to be easy, right? No. Their biggest obstacle after some initial actions and whatnot is really going to be this line here at Yorktown, where the Warwick River, I believe it is going to be flooded intentionally by the Confederates. And there will be a couple of actions early on. Early April at Lee's Mill, where the Trust has saved 7 acres. And then in mid to late April, some point over at a place called Dam Number 1 that you can't see off in the distance as well. After those attempts failed, the Union moved as close as they could to the Confederate positions and began to get ready for siege operations. You know the story. This is going on throughout all of April and into early May of 1862. During that time, the Union Army established one of its largest all-time camps at just right around where I stand here at Yorktown. It's called Camp Winfield Scott. And at Camp Scott, General George McClellan will make his headquarters about 500 or 600 yards, maybe 700 yards off in that direction on 2 branches of Wormley's Creek. There are guns being erected with their positions, 100-pounders at a house called Farrenhold's House over there, and along other batteries, such as Battery Number 4 and other ones that are numbered along the way. The Union sets up an extensive camp here. It's a beautiful camp, and it has company streets. It's got pine boughs and everything like that to make it look all comfortable, and the Union will be here for 4 or 5 weeks during it. And during that time, photographers came here to this camp and recorded at least 37 photos at the camp. If you were to look on the Library of Congress site, you would see a lot fewer actually noted in this area, and you would see, a bunch of other photos that that were taken here that are labeled for another place. Let me explain. There are a couple of houses here, one of which I'm walking up to right now. This one's called the Clark House. We'll get a little bit closer. Sometimes it's labeled in the photos as the Howe House. There are 2 close-up photos of it and some other far-away photos of it. There's another house in this vicinity that is sometimes labeled as Lafayette's headquarters. Sometimes it's labeled as the Allen House, and sometimes it is labeled otherwise, with no particular location given other than Yorktown. Then there are a series of camp photos, just about all of which are labeled as Cumberland Landing. We know that there were photos taken at Cumberland Landing. We know just where the landing is. With permission of a landowner, you can still line it up and whatnot. And you can see it's sort of a different sort of camp than Camp Scott. It didn't have company streets or pine boughs and everything. It's more of a quickly assembled camp, one that they weren't going to use for very long, which is actually true. So you have these things that are sort of mislabeled and miscaptioned, and I didn't pay much attention to this until, I believe, in 2012. I received an email about some preservation work going on, and attached to that email about the preservation work, it included the most famous photo of Yorktown, or of this camp. And it is a 5-plate panorama. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Back then, you couldn't just take your phone and sort of scan it along. You had to actually take 5 different photos, and I'm stringing them together for you right here. And the panorama is not just a beautiful panorama, one of the largest, if not the largest, single series of plates that fit together so well of the Civil War, but also it is taken from high up in a tree. Okay, we always wondered, how did you get up in that tree and everything like that? And it is, all these photos at the Library of Congress are labeled as Cumberland Landing, except on this email that I received that one day, it said that these photos were actually taken it showed at the bottom of it that it was taken at Camp Winfield Scott. And I said, no, that's not right. It's Cumberland Landing. Let me go back and check Gardner's actual catalog. The photographer, Alexander Gardner, had captioned these things, and he had captioned them at Cumberland Landing. Now, you know, photographers sometimes miscaption things. Sometimes they did it by accident. But really, I mean, they didn't have any good way to scratch captions into their glass plate negatives. So therefore, they had to write it sort of on sleeves. Those sleeves don't last forever. And remember, sometimes photographers wanted their photos to show things that it actually didn't. So sometimes they changed captions. They were known to have done this as time went on. In any case, I sort of said, wow, well, Gardner said it was taken at Cumberland Landing, so let's forget it. But in 2013, in preparing for a photographic seminar, I started looking at these things anew, okay? And I noticed a few things. One, in the 5-plate panorama taken from the tree, there was a house in it that looked a lot like this house that I'm going to show you now, the Clark House. The Clark House dates to 1840. It's in a beautiful state of preservation. I am on private property with the permission of the landowner, and a few of you at the Trust actually came here with me once, I believe in 2018, during our Newport News Conference on a pretty blazing hot day, as I remember, to check it out. In any case, I noticed that in the 5-plate panorama taken from the tree, it looked like you could see the Clark House in it, except, oh no, the sort of porch, the portico, is actually different. So I said, well, maybe it's taken from a tree, but these photos show the other side of the house. And sorry to spoil the end, but it's going to be that way, okay? We are on the south side of the house right now. So I said, okay, well, if it shows the other side of the house, that means the photos from the tree must be taken from 600, 700, 800 yards away from a tree. And I started looking at all the photos taken at Yorktown. Now, I know of at least 37 that were taken at Camp Winfield Scott. I've been able to now visually connect, I think, 19 of them, if I'm correct. I started sort of setting up a little virtual reality thing in my mind. I don't know if you do this with photos. Oh, this one was taken from this direction and this one from that direction. So I sort of understand what everything looks like now, right? So I started figuring, okay, so if several hundred yards off in that direction is McClellan's headquarters, and the photo from the tree would be taken there, I'd be looking at the Clark House from the other direction, okay? So I started setting all this up. I quickly realized that something like almost half of the photos taken at Camp Scott, or labeled as having been taken at Camp Scott, were actually taken concerning the entourage of some French royalty. That includes the Comte de Paris and the Duke of Chartres. And if you speak French, I apologize for anything that I'm doing right here. And I can't really visually connect any of those. But the ones of the camp, I started looking at more. And in identifying the Clark House, I said, okay, if it is the Clark House, I should be able to somehow figure this out. So I went back to the photos of the Clark House. They're from this direction right over here. I wish I could get you a better angle from here, but just trust me, you can sort of start to see some of the front porch and things like that right there. And I noticed a few things in there. Number one, when I looked right past the Clark House, I could see that there was a rail fence past the house there. And I could see that there was sort of like clothing hanging on that rail fence. Then I went to the 5-plate panorama looking back, and I sort of saw a fence that looks like it ended right there, like it does in the photo of the Clark House, sometimes labeled Howe House. And it looked like I could see something on the fence over there. And I then noticed another photo that was taken from higher up that I quickly determined had to have been taken from the Clark House. There's actually 2 of those photos that look down and show that fence. They show the end of the fence. There's a couple of graves visible there as well, and that same piece of clothing. So, right away, now I knew that there were photos that I thought were taken looking this way of the Clark House, and I knew that there were photos taken that way from the Clark House, from in front of it here, as well as from the top over there. So now I feel that I understood that I had photos taken from the south side of the Clark House looking across what would have to be Camp Winfield Scott to some extent, and I had thought that the photos looking in the other direction were, from the tree, also showed this house from the other side. I confirmed that with the end of the fence and whatnot, but I wanted to go a little bit further, and the photographer, in this case James Gibson, really helped me out, and Alexander Gardner, because not only did they take photos from the far side of the Clark House looking off that way, then they went into the camp and continued to take photos looking in that direction, okay? So now I got really excited, and that doesn't take much to get me excited, but I was getting extra excited, because then I realized, Okay, so I have photos from right behind me of the Clark house. Then I knew that there was some sort of a fence post that ended right over here, and that there would be a grave that I might be able to see over here, and that there might be, some things draped across this fence over here. And then I would be actually walking into the camp over in the distance there. I quickly determined by looking at the distinct tents that I could hop my way across Camp Scott by going from the photo taken from the window behind me. Let me get you a view over here. The photos I just referenced, and this is the side of the Clark house. And by the way, I was able to then confirm the different type of a portico over here. So I became convinced that the 5-plate panorama was taken about 500 or 600 yards or 700 yards behind me, and that I was looking at this side of the Clark house. And then the photographer, so Gibson, went into, I believe, that window there and took photos looking that way. And in those photos, I could look at other photos taken of the camp and line up distinctive tents and pieces and whatnot. And in that fashion, I was able to hop my way across the field over here, what was then a field, what is now a development. In any case, I realized, well, if they were taking a photo from a tree, I know they had signal towers around here that they had set up. I know regiments were drilling around here. You can see that in the photos. And I knew they had to access that tree somehow, and it had to be a pretty good way to get on top of that tree for a photographer to get one of those big bulky cameras up there. So I theorized that if I was looking across the camp, that I should be able to see a ladder leaning against a tree one day. And I'll never forget it. I was doing all sorts of work on the train on the way home from work one day, and then there I was in my kitchen a little bit after that, where I said, okay, it should be in this photo. And scanning way to the left of it, there it was, right past McClellan's headquarters. I could see a ladder leaning up against a tree in the distance. I was jumping up and down. My wife was next to me. She's used to these sort of things, but this was particularly intense. I was really excited, but I could only see part of the ladder. It was almost like a scandal from keeping me from seeing the whole thing. And then I realized, wait, there's photos of McClellan's actual headquarters tent. And so I went to the McClellan photo, which looks a little bit more to the left, and there it was. I could see a ramshackle 2-bit slipshod, sort of bargain basement yard sale ladder system that's going to take you up this very tall tree. And if you look all the way to the top of the tree, you could see not only ladders leading all the way to the top, but a platform at the top, along with some sort of a winch and a pulley system for bringing the wet plates up and down, because, you can't let a wet plate get dry, and climbing down that ladder would have taken a long time. So they were actually sort of funneling wet plates up and down in order to get this panorama, and I am glad they did. The mystery was solved, right? So I knew that there was now photos taken in both directions of this camp. I knew exactly where McClellan's headquarters was physically on the ground. In fact, if you go over to where it is, you can see the branches in Wormley Creek that the development is around which the development is laid out, and I can actually show exactly where it was. There's a park there today where you can see some tall trees that sit in approximately the same location as the panoramic photo tree, shall I say, okay? There's one more thing left, though. I have all these photos of the camp. I was unable to line up all these photos of the royalty, but I was still bothered by this Allen's house thing, okay? And while I was sitting in this house with the owner and his wife, he had said, some people think that Lafayette's headquarters photo was actually taken right near this house. And I said, well, I see a house that looks like it in the distance of the panorama, and that would place it right about here. I was like, but it couldn't be that simple. Well, wait, looking at this Allen house photos, it shows contrabands in front. I should be able to find some similarities between them. So the first thing I did was look at one of the Clark house photos, and I quickly saw that that there's like a contraband woman in white, a washerwoman perhaps, who is, out toward the front, and she's wearing white, and I could clearly see that same woman standing next to the house that may or may not, so I thought, be here at the time. And then I noticed that there was a big sort of brace holding this now very dilapidated pre-Revolutionary War structure up. And I said, well, I should be able to see that brace in the background of the photo of the 5-plate panorama. So here I am, pulling up that photo in the study here in the house where James Gibson had taken some of his photos, and there I saw it, the brace holding up Lafayette's old headquarters, or Allen's house as they called it. And it wasn't in any different location. It was in fact right here. And then when I looked into it, more things fell into place. I could clearly see that the fence that ended somewhere right around here in this yard today, that I could see that the photo from the Clark House up there showed some of the same things that I could see in Alan's house as well. So everything buttoned up, and this is how photo research works. When you get it right, you shouldn't have to say, oh, maybe this has changed and that has changed. These things really work out. I consider it a great service that we now know all of this, because Camp Winfield Scott, with the exception of this beautiful 1840 Clark House, is compromised. It is under concrete, it is under houses and whatnot, but we have a good virtual environment here, using the Clark House as a base. So sometimes you need very little in order to actually digitally reconstruct something, or more importantly, reconstruct it in our minds. Isn't this what it's all about, really? Hearing stories, going to places, looking at maps, reading accounts, and then combining them with photographs and anything else we can bring to bear to understand our past a little bit better. You, as a group, are the last ones to whom I would ever need to sell this idea. So I hope you enjoyed this little photographic journey. I certainly enjoyed just taking it now, because if you can't tell, I sort of enjoy this stuff. And let me just end by thanking you for supporting battlefield preservation, and by giving you one last pan here around what is left of Camp Winfield Scott, 1862.